All right. This is all just gonna be a bunch of clicking anyway, so let's kind of get right into it. So I kind of wanted to tell stories here about my most recent Warhammer games, which are my first Warhammer games. I was kind of getting into the hobby for the first time. So I had a buddy. He invited me over to his house. We are gonna play a quick little game. His Space Marines versus my Space Marines. We did a little bit of a narrative setup beforehand. We were thinking, so mine are a custom chapter. But his are the Knights of Blood, which are a lore chapter, who are marked as traitors, but are like vaguely loyal to the Emperor. So we had the setting of a bombed out fuel depot, and actually I could click over real quick and show real quick. This is kind of like when we set up our terrain here. You can kind of see him on the left side, me on the right side. But it bombed out fuel depot. Basically, both sides going at it for the same supplies. Except for my guys were supposed to get the supplies. His guys weren't supposed to be there. So that's kind of where the conflict showed up and started. Anyway, we started placing everything out on the board. Well, I placed everything out on the board. So we're doing our alternate deployments. And wherein I placed everything on the board right away, he took a bit of a different. He had a couple guys in reserves, like his jump pack dudes, and he had some Terminators in reserve as well, and that was kind of important. I didn't do anybody in reserves because I was new, so I wanted to just kind of figure out how that worked by seeing him do it. So I let him take the initiative on that, and kind of as like a result, the game was kind of decided there. But I had a dreadnought. I had like a little like troop carrier, some basic troops. He had two repulsors, which were incredibly damaging because they were two massive tanks. So that didn't help, especially with my list being a little limited at the time. But I did have some vehicles myself with the Impulsor and Redemptor Dread, so it's not like I was completely wiped off the table turn one. And kind of going into turn one, something did get wiped off the table pretty much right away. Is his Repulsor just completely took out my armored troop carrier, which I then had to get my Hellblasters out of the blowing up like wreck. They kind of like cowering behind a building. They didn't get to do too much. They did manage to get some shots off between the Impulsor and the Hellblasters. They did put some shots into the Repulsor, but it didn't really do any damage at all. Besides like some minor superficial dents here and there. But what worked out rather well was that I was able to kind of control some of my base points, some a little bit of the mid board with some movement. But he did better, and I believe he was sitting at 3 points to my 2, which kind of my fault. I set points up to be flavorful on the map, so they weren't really in the best position for me. In a way, kind of self-nerf. No big deal. That was turn one, though. It took forever. This first game, we're playing really slow. My phone died. Everything went poor. Honestly, things were going bad enough that when I got there, his dog had bitten me. So it was a rough time through and through. But the game was getting fun. So we went into turn two, where that's when his strategic reserves would kick in, and they hurt. He had this death company come in on jump packs, and they were just cutting my Hellblaster to pieces. I think my poor Redemptor, it either went down this round or the next, but it was just barely holding out against the other Repulsor. The Terminators, they arrived in, but they actually didn't do as well because my Blade Guard and Aggressors had come into melee with them and were just cutting them to pieces with the Lieutenant, which was amazing. It was crazy to see just this 3-man squad of like power sword users just butchering, but they were doing it. So that was nice. That was bringing me back in. I was actually kind of getting excited. Everything was going well. We kind of moved into the next turn, which point my main base was just getting destroyed. These Death Company guys were just rushing through. I locked them up in melee as long as I could. I had like an apothecary reviving people, but it was not working out. So in spite of all of that, um, we ended up, it was like third turn. I barely had anything left. I think my blade guard ended up dying to the repulsor, and then my aggressors were the only guys left really of my team. So it was getting late. We called it. His death company, they came in big. It showed the use of reserves to me. Stratagems as well. All through the game, he was using more stratagems than I was. I threw in some more at the end, and they made a difference, like Armor of Contempt and stuff like that. So I kind of learned from there. I was like, okay, so stratagems, reserves.
Lord Captain,
I need to be using both.
My apologies.
If I want to win.
I did not notice your entrance. Oh.
So I was like, okay,
yes.
no big deal. This goes into my second game, which was only a few days later. I had scheduled with somebody online,
I must say,
which was we played at a local Warhammer store.
Its every chapter is
this one was no flavor behind it. It was just Black Templars versus my Space Marines. So my Space Marines list was very similar, but I changed it up because my Redemptor Dreadnought is printed, and I didn't want the Warhammer store to notice. I didn't think they would. It looks very close to real, but I'm holding it off until I have a bigger list, so that way they don't notice it was easy. So I had the Intercessors, Blade Guard, Gravis, Warglaves, which were my Armigers. There's these big, like, stompy robots. After I picked my Ephesaur Assassin because I thought it'd be funny just to send in like a crack addict assassin across the battlefield, and he didn't really do too great. But if he could have got into what he wanted, he would have been pretty good. And then I had my Lieutenant, Captain, and Gravis Armor, and Apothecary like I did last game. My opponent, the guy I just was in a Discord with, he had Black Templars. He was running Intercessors as well. Sword Brethren, which is pretty normal. He had Terminators. Once again, Terminators on the enemy team. A Brutalis Dreadnought and an Impulsor.
Thank you for your concern.
So we were equal in vehicles, really, between his Dreadnought and my Warglaves, because I had two Warglaves and he had two vehicles himself. And actually, if I positioned a little better at the start, I think my Warglaves probably would have been able to destroy both of his vehicles without taking too much damage. But as far as deployment went, I kind of matched him. And actually, I have a little, like, diagram. So let's go here. So this was the last game. You can kind of see, like, the rough diagram here. But it was a little bit later on in the last game. A little bit later on. You can kind of see how much I lost really quickly. But this was this was the what do you call it? The fucking second game. So second game I placed more safely. So I matched his Impulsor with my Warglaive. At which point I believe he set up his dudes here, and I wanted to put my next Warglaive down, so I put it up top. He did not match with the Brutalis up top, which would have been good for me. Instead, he put it in the mid board, which, unfortunately, my assassin I put over here, he was ready to run up mid board next turn and just game end some people. There was a little building here, so unfortunately, that was going to be a problem. I had my bulk of my infantry here, so Intercessors, no, these were the Blade Guard. Aggressors I kept in reserve, which was kind of like the lesson learned. I'm going to put, this is a picture kind of to show like a little bit into the game. But yeah, so this is kind of like the terrain setup we had with the buildings and everything, and you can't see it, but there was a bit of a problem there. So basically, that was our deployment. We got everything set up. Turn one, he went first, which I did not want to happen. I wanted that first turn so I could blitz his leadership with my assassin. Instead, what happened,
one should not
he put his Brutalis in between the assassin and his units, which I don't believe was planned by him, but since it cut its movement off, he kind of saved himself from like getting like completely fucked. So that locked down my assassin. So the assassin's really not going to do anything for the rest of the game. The warglaves, they pushed both flanks. They didn't get far enough, I don't believe. No, the bottom one got far enough because he made a charge. The one on the top didn't have anything to charge into, so he couldn't make it to the point. So I was holding my base and the bottom point, whereas my opponent was holding his base and he had midpoint, I believe, at that time, or he had taken midpoint with one of his guys temporarily. But either way, we both got 10 points that round.
A Fearbald and
But,
Felek.
okay, so that's first turn.
I do not understand.
Second turn,
They were merely the
my opponent's
keepers
still
of
going
Herak
first,
5.
so he would go
the
ahead
same
and
time,
deep strike
I find myself
his Terminators
overwhelmed
into
with
my
new
home
excitement
objective,
and
which during turn
anticipation.
1 I made a mistake.
At
I actually
last
pushed my
I have
intercessors
set foot
off
outside my
of my
familiar
main
walls,
point,
and
hoping their
into a
sticky
world that I
objectives
have
would help out.
only seen before in the
But
pages of
with the
books.
Terminators coming in on second
Your
turn,
ship
I lost
alone
that
is a
point.
treasure trove of remarkable artifacts
And
and curiosities. And just
nothing
imagine
really
the
bad
things
happened to
that
me elsewhere
await
on the board.
beyond, but
I was able to use my
delight must
warglaves to
seem
kill some
childish
stuff
to you, surely.
on both flanks.
In your heart, you must be finding all
But
this quite amusing.
my Gravis Marines, who I had brought in from reserves on the opposite end of the board, couldn't make it onto the point. So we ended up in a situation where, I believe on the second turn, we ended up both scoring 10 points, where if I played just a hair better, I would have scored 15 to his 5, which 15 to 5 would have pretty much changed the game around a good bit. Yeah, so we're on turn 2. My guys came in. I basically lost that on points. Probably one of the biggest flubs by moving those footmen off the base of my home objective. I had pushed them up so that way they could help against the Dreadnought in the mid. That didn't really work out very well for me either. But turn 3, I was getting... My intercessors were dying very quickly to the rear shots from the Terminator, so they weren't going to be much use very soon. So I ended up charging them into the Dreadnought in response to kind of keep them out of trouble, which is not a very good place for them to be either. So what happened elsewhere on the board was my Warglaive was able to take out, I believe, either the vehicle they were in, or... No, I believe the vehicle was taken out, I believe, in turn 2 on the bottom point. So I destroyed the impulsor. What I think happened is I then was able to start killing his heavy armored flamers that he had inside the vehicle. Where during turn 3, he, on the opposite end of the map, had used his Terminators and last bit of Sword Brothers to finish off my Warglaive that was on the top. So I actually lost that point up top. I held the bot point, but I think the way this worked out, the Terminators weren't on my point. He wasn't on mid. He'd taken top, and my Gravis had moved up to take his home. So I held 2 of his points that round. I held 2 points, and he only held the top point. So I was ahead in turn 3, in spite of what I lost. So it was kind of just coming up to this last, turn 4. And unfortunately, my bottom point was destroyed. There was nothing left. So he moved his guys back onto that point. My assassin died a while ago fighting the Brutalis. My intercessors died. So all I had left was my bottom Warglaive and my Gravis, who, while able to put shots out and stuff, I was like, I had thought, I was like, the only way I could win this is if my Gravis can make a charge into the mid-board. Because in the mid-board, he had moved some intercessors, I believe. And because he had moved those intercessors, because he was before me, I knew he was going to get points there, he was going to get points on my base, and he was going to get points on the other thing. So that's 3 whole points he was holding. if I could kill enough of them, I could take that point from him. I'd hold 2. He'd hold 2. And at this point in the game, I was actually ahead of him by 5 points. So that would have been enough to win. We weren't playing with secondaries, which probably would have made a big difference. It was like a 7-inch charge, and I rolled it and got a 5. And I was like, no, I lost. Except for stratagems. I was like, command reroll. So I rolled again, and I rolled less. So no charge. Wasn't able to shoot because they don't have assault, so I had to basically advance and tried to charge. And I was using this Gladius task thing for it. So completely flubbed, ruined everything I had planned. Game was very, very close. We shook hands afterwards. It was a very good game. I think we both had a great time with it. But 40-35. He had won by 5 points. 5 points. Yeah. So, what did I learn? Intercessors, they gotta stay on the home point if I'm gonna have them there. That's like their job. They gotta hold it down. I think they held that for 1 round, the game would have been tied. If they held for 1 round, the game would have been tied. Another thing, which would have probably led to a 5-point win, is if my aggressors just stayed on his point and just shot. So I kind of need to just know when risk is worth. So if I calculated the points better, I'm pretty sure I could have won there. But I learned a good bunch, and I think overall it was a great game. So that is my first 2 games, and I'm looking forward to the next couple, and I'm sure they're going to be well. I have a whole bunch of different army ideas and concepts. I think my Space Marines are going to hit the bench for a little bit. Until I want to play some of my Imperial Knights. I have a little bit of Imperial Agents I want to play as well. I just want to get good games in with most of them and then kind of go in. I did schedule myself up for a tournament, so I'm kind of looking forward to that. I think that's going to be a fun one. But I kind of need to learn my army very soon. And hopefully they respond, because I have some proxies I want to use for that, because of the way they look. And I'd prefer to use the proxies rather than get by Skitarii, but we'll see. We'll see what their response is. If they hedge against it, I might just drop from it. Mostly because I play for fun. I plan to do some co-op games too with some of the Discord people I know. We're gonna do little 2v2s, running 2 500-point lists versus 2 500-point lists. So those will start up soon. So I'm hoping to get some fun stories out of them as well.